Hello, and welcome to the Glasgow Motorway Archive podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm John.
John, it's great to see you. 2022, first episode of the year, and you're back here in the office with me.
Yes, in the flesh and not coughing all the time. It's good to be healthy, and it's good to see you again.
Yep, and you too. And I hope everyone enjoyed the Christmas podcast. We had a great time pulling that together, even though we were all online.
It was a challenge, but great editing there, Stuart.
Yeah, it all seemed to go very, very well. So anyway, it's good to see you back. Fighting fit, all back to normal. Good to see. If I was to ask you what the first thing people always say to us when we talk about the Glasgow motorway system is, what do you think that would be?
Well, obviously how wonderful it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Aside from that, what else do they always say?
It's always about, why did they build all the motorways in the city? Why isn't there a ring road?
Why is it not a ring road?
Why is it not a ring road?
Yeah.
London has a ring road.
Yep.
So does Manchester.
Yep.
Why not Glasgow?
Exactly. So this month we're going to talk about Glasgow's unbuilt outer ring roads.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've never done that before.
No, we haven't. And there's plenty to talk about.
There is.
It straddles a number of decades, in fact, the proposals, as we've spoken about many, many times. So we're going to focus on one or two routes that were proposed but didn't happen. And we're going to talk about why they didn't happen.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll even talk about whether they could happen today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to give our opinions on these as well, because it is an interesting, so a little bit short and detailed in some areas. It's been a funny one to research, hasn't it?
Yeah, because a lot of these routes were at the very early stages of being developed, and they didn't really go much beyond that.
That's right.
There's not a lot of detail behind them. Whereas the motorways in the centre, that were always the highest priority, had a lot of detail behind them, even at the early stages.
Yes.
So we're going to have a look at that. Okay, let's kick off then with a bit of background. So Glasgow is an interesting conurbation.
It is.
It's set in a valley between steep hills on either side.
Yep.
And to an extent, you've got a wide estuary in the west, and you've got more hills in the east.
Yeah.
On the way over to Edinburgh. Okay, so the conurbation itself is really contained within this valley, this circular shaped valley. Okay? And historically, all of our major routes, A82, A8, A77, A74, A80, they all converged very close to Glasgow.
Yes.
And the city centre. Okay?
And in the city centre, at the time, people were working there,
Yes.
living there,
Yes.
and it was industry as well.
Correct.
There was people live in the city centre, and we go shopping in the city centre.
Yep.
You can imagine all of these different kind of zones all within in this city centre box, where you don't think Glasgow city centre is an industrial place now.
Correct.
But I'll hand over to you here to say, that the time was completely different.
Yeah.
And that's what we have found out.
What we need to remember is that the M8 through Glasgow city centre is a ring road. Okay?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't appreciate that it is actually a bypass of Glasgow city centre. So when people say to us, it should have been a ring road, actually, we kind of have one of those already.
We do. I think people think of that because it isn't actually a ring. We only got the kind of north and west flanks built.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to bear that in mind. And like you say, all those various reasons that you outlined, at the time, Glasgow was the centre of the universe as far as this conurbation was concerned.
Yeah.
There was no out of
town shopping centres. So no Bray Heads, no Silverburns, no Forts.
So anybody who wanted a good shopping experience had to come to Glasgow city centre. Okay. All right. There was an element of public transport there, as we've spoken about many times. We spoke about the GGTS only a few episodes ago. A lot of people did those journeys by rail, but an increasing number of people were doing them by car.
Yes.
Okay.
As car ownership especially started to rise,
So,
40s, 50s.
With Glasgow city centre being so clogged up as it was, and journey times, as mentioned again, across the city were as much as an hour at times, in the peak periods, the corporation wanted to speed up journey times across the city. They wanted to empty the city centre of traffic so they could start to bring in the pedestrianisation plans.
Okay, well, this is easy. We build a bypass, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So, in the same regard, John Cullen always said that the closer a replacement route is to the existing route, the more effective it will be at clearing the original route.
Okay.
So the closer the M8 was to the A8,
Yeah.
the more effective it would be at taking traffic using the A8 away from it.
Because you could imagine yourself on that clogged A8.
Yes.
And then suddenly this new motorway is there. There's
Yeah.
no traffic lights. There's no pedestrian crossings. It's this restricted access highway. It's right
Yeah.
next to it that you can use unimpeded. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. It's not something that's miles and miles away.
Yeah. So that then tied in with the Scottish office's proposals for a new cross-country motorway. And they wanted to replace the A8 across the entire Central Belt.
Okay.
And they replaced it with a high-quality replacement M8.
Mm-hmm.
But in places, they're fairly close together.
Yes.
This is where the justification for inner ring roads versus outer ring roads start to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to think about it in the Glasgow conurbation sort of style.
So everything was in. You're saying like at the time, the conurbation, everything. The Glasgow city centre was the centre of the
Yeah.
universe.
Very
You've
much
got
so.
this rural A8s that they've
Yeah.
upgraded to M8,
Mhm.
and you've got this badly congested city centre.
Yeah.
So what are you kind of do here? You're talking about have a bypass, a ring road.
Yeah.
But have it close together so people would use it in these
That's right.
congested routes in the centre.
Close enough to the main through routes
Mhm.
that'll take traffic off them, but not so far away that it's not an efficient alternative
Yeah.
for people or an effective alternative.
Because people
for
might think, oh, you've built this new bypass. It's 20 miles away.
Yes.
It runs clear, but I have to drive 20 miles to it.
Exactly.
I see your point.
Okay.
Okay.
So the priority was always to get the major cross-city routes upgraded first.
Mm-hmm.
So for the A8, we did the M8. For the A74, we've done the M74. Same with the A77, the A80. All these routes have all been replaced.
Mm-hmm.
They all still converge fairly near Glasgow city centre, but the purpose of the inner ring road was to take them and then distribute traffic away.
Yeah.
Okay? So the general theory was at the time, was that, yeah, eventually we are going to need some outer ring roads. And we had an intermediate ring road and an outer ring road that were proposed in the highway plan and then taken on and developed further by the GGTS, actually incorporated it within the entire conurbation. Okay? Now, they weren't the first to consider it because even in the Bruce plan in 1945 and in Abercrombie's plan in 1949, intermediate ring roads and outer ring roads were a key part of those plans as well.
Yeah.
Okay? And there's a whole number of reasons why we didn't get there, and we're going to talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
But the development, as I say, was focused on the main routes first. Okay? Now, the question
the routes
is...
that would provide the most relief and benefit at the time
Yes. Yeah.
where the congestion was.
So, let's talk about some of the routes that were proposed.
Yes.
Okay? And we'll talk about the highway plan first, then the GGTS, and then we'll do a comparison about if this one had been built versus, say, the M8 or the M74 or whatever, and you'll kind of start to see why the outer ring roads did not get prioritised for construction, or at least that's the hope.
That's the hope, yeah.
All right. Okay, so starting with the highway plan, which was the first one that really considered motorways in any detail.
Yeah.
Okay. So they took Bruce's and Abercrombie's original proposals and developed them further and came up with their own system of roads, like the Inner Ring Road, the Ayr Motorway, the Stirling Motorway, the Maryhill Motorway. All these ones we've spoken about many, many times before. And what they envisaged was this American-style system where you had your Inner Ring Road, and then you had the spokes of the wheel coming off.
That's it says spokes, all
They
like a
would then-
dartboard.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they would then meet the first ring road, the intermediate one,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'd have more spokes, and then that would meet the outer ring road. Okay? And in Glasgow, for the intermediate ring road, what they proposed was, firstly, and this might surprise you a bit, the Clyde Tunnel and its two approach roads.
Yep.
Okay? So if you think of the western flank of
Which
what
is
was
the
going to
King-
be the middle ring road.
Oh, right. Okay, I was going to say the western flank of the inner ring, which we have now, is like the Kingston Bridge.
Yeah, yeah. So the western flank of this intermediate ring road
There's a Clyde Tunnel.
was the Clyde Tunnel and its expressways on either side.
Mm-hmm.
So the north approach, the south approach, but also the Crow Road Expressway.
Okay, so that is kind of the upgrade of Balshaggery Avenue and Crow Road
Yep,
and everything.
all the
Yeah.
way up through Annisland Cross, all the way up to Canningsburn Toll. For the north flank of the intermediate ring, we would have had the Lomond Motorway, which, if you've looked at the plans, you see that
So,
ends
well,
around about
if-
Canningsburn.
Just to keep everyone in the loop here,
Yeah.
right? Because some people might be like, where is he talking about? If you imagine it like a clock,
Yeah.
and we're working clockwise, so where does this Lomond start? It starts in Drumchapel, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And then it cuts across to the Mary Hill, and then where does it go from there? It's,
So it would skirt all the way around the north of the city centre,
that's right.
eventually becoming North Link Motorway, where it interchanged with the Maryhill Motorway. So the Maryhill would turn away southeast and head towards the inner ring road, but the north flank of this intermediate ring would have continued around the north of the city centre as the North Link motorway.
Yeah.
Now that then would be heading for the M80 and the M8 out in the East End. But before it got there, it interchanged with what we would have called the East Link motorway.
Right. Okay, so this is like the equivalent to the western side of this, where it was like the Clyde Tunnel.
Yeah. So the East Link motorway was really a southern continuation of the M80 Stirling motorway. And it was going all the way down through the east end of the city on the exact line that the East End regeneration route has been built on.
So that new road at Parkhead.
Yeah,
Okay.
all the way down through there. Then when it got near Tory Glen, it then turned west and then became a southern flank of the intermediate ring as the South Link motorway.
Yeah.
And that continued all the way through the south side along roads like Tipwood Road,
That's right.
up through Dunbrec along the Moss Park Boulevard, and all the way back to the M8 at the Clyde Tunnel South Approach.
Which
There's a
many times we've always mentioned that's why it's very wide verges in there and stuff like that.
Now, something I should have said before I started talking about all this, if people want to follow along with what we're talking about, if you go onto the website and you go to glasgowmotorwayarchive.org/GGTS-map, you'll get the plans on there and you'll see some of these routes that we're talking about. It might actually be quite helpful.
Yeah,
If you follow them
I mean, it's really good. And it works on mobile.
Okay. That was the intermediate ring road as proposed in the highway plan.
Yeah.
They also had an outer ring road
In the highway plan.
in the highway plan, but it wasn't a full ring around
It was
the
like
city.
so I know what you're going to mention here, but it was more like a big southern orbital.
Yes. Yeah. And it was referred to as the C ring road.
And why was it called C? Is it because of the shape of it? Because that's actually what I assume
Yeah,
why it's
it is.
called C.
It's because of the shape. It's like a back to front C.
That's
but,
exactly
but
it.
that was the name. That's why. And the C ring road actually wasn't developed exclusively for the highway plan. It had existed as a proposal all the way back through the 50s back to Bruce. And really what it provided was another ring from Hurlet on the A726 near Paisley
Yep, I know the place.
all the way round through the south side. So Tory Glen, Thornton Hall, around the north of East Kilbride, and then up to the M73. And then originally they then proposed that a dual carriageway would have gone all the way around the north of the city, eventually terminating on Canningsburn Toll.
Yeah.
But what the highway plan they took the southern element of it and retained that.
Yeah.
They changed the northern sections and made it part of the intermediate ring as part of the North Link motorway and the Lomond, as I've just mentioned. But the C ring was retained in the south.
That's
and
right.
it would really have come all the way up to the M73 to Bailston.
So it kind of, it skirts around East Kilbride, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It comes up, but I always think that the comparison with the C ring, looking at it, it's much further away from the city centre than the North Link was.
So the C ring would have been an outer ring, but only for the south and east of the city centre. Okay, so really, if you think about it, if you were coming up from Ayr and you were looking to go to Edinburgh, you could possibly have used the C ring as a good alternative.
Yeah,
There.
exactly.
Okay. Now,
Or if you live in East Kilbride and you maybe wanted to go through to Neilson or Barhead
Exactly.
or Paisley,
Yeah.
you
Now, the other proposal there with the C ring, at the Paisley end, we know that the county of Renfrew had some proposals to extend that further. And there was a plan that they had that would have taken the road from Hurlet up to the M8 between Hillington and Paisley Road. So between 26 and 27, they had a proposal for a motorway coming up through there, up through Hawkhead, joining the M8 roundabout there. That was never popular.
No, because I know in later iterations it went the other side of Paisley, didn't it? Kind of interchanging where the A737 is.
Yeah, so that was not popular at all. Okay, and that probably fed into the GGTS proposals that then came a bit later, a few years down the line. So, will we talk about their proposals now?
We will.
Yeah, okay. And again, if you've got the map open in front of you, this will be really helpful. So, their intermediate ring road was basically the same as the highway plans. Okay, so it used the Lomond motorway, the North Link motorway, the East and South links as well. Where they changed was their outer rings. And they were designed in a way to be more beneficial to the conurbation as a whole, where the C ring really only was going to help the south and east of Glasgow.
Yeah.
The proposals for their outer roads were actually far more substantial and of much more benefit to the conurbation. Now, thinking about the ring that they proposed, starting in the west, so if you came off the north of the Erskine Bridge, you would have been able to continue northwards on the Campsie Expressway.
Yes.
And that was a road that, in fairness, was never more than a line on a map. But that would then have provided a northern route all the way around the north of the conurbation, joining the M80 near Auchenkilns.
Yeah, it continues. I mean, I've got one of the maps. Actually, just to plug our own website here.
Good.
Using the maps of the GGTS on the mobile, just to make sure they work, just so we're not misleading it all. It actually it goes past like Kirkintilloch, as you say, and it goes right all the way around and comes back down to Auchenkilns. This is the northern bypass for Glasgow, so to speak.
Yeah.
However, there's you say it's aligned to the map. It's also only a few sentences as well from what we've seen. Now, what we've been able to garner is this route could have either been a single carriageway or a dual carriageway. It says expressway, so I've always been inclined to think this would have been a dual carriageway, all purpose, not motorway though.
From my own conversations with John Cullen, I believe the intention was that it would have been a limited access single carriageway route initially, built to modern standards with a nice new modern alignment, because you'll know yourself, some of those roads up through there are not the best.
The north part of town is very poorly served. Yeah.
But it would have been able to be upgraded easily to, dual carriageway.
So the overbridges would have been wide enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was the proposal there. So, I mean, it's important to note that the counties of Dumbarton, Lanark, Renfrew, they were all, giving their suggestions into the Greater Glasgow Transportation Study for what they wanted for their areas as well. And these routes that we were also talking about as being an outer ring road of Glasgow were actually regional and local routes to some of these counties as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I give you an example here. So the County of Dumbarton was keen to improve links between Kirkintilloch, Mulgai and Cumbernauld. So that Campsie Expressway
would have served all that.
So although it was going to be an outer ring road or a bypass, it could actually also have been a distributor road for traffic going between these major
absolutely. It's so conveniently nestled between them all. Yeah.
Thinking then about where the road was going to go from the M80, it was just going to go straight south. It was going to use the dual carriageway section at A73, just south of Cumbernauld, that people might be aware of. Very high speed section of dual carriageway, grade separated. That was the first section of the Cumbernauld to Hamilton motorway that was proposed.
But not built as motorway. No.
It terminates obviously just north of the village of Stand, where it goes back to single carriageway A73. However, it should have continued southwards as a good quality high-speed dual carriageway route to motorway standards, as we've said, and head all the way for Airdrie. It would have split Airdrie and Coatbridge in two, and then continued south towards Motherwell.
I think you're looking at the time, and I mean, Airdrie and Coatbridge they've become quite conurban in a way that they've kind of grown together. There was a gap between them at the time.
At that time, there was a clear gap between the two towns.
With these towns, and it would have, of course, as you've pointed out to me in the past and driving these, the Coatbridge Airdrie Expressway would have interchanged at that point as well.
Yeah. So we would have continued all the way south to Motherwell. The motorway would then have joined the existing A723 between Hamilton and Motherwell, so that really high-speed section of dual carriageway between Hamilton and Motherwell that goes under the M74 at Junction 6.
Yeah, and this explains why Junction 6 is so massive and technical and complicated. It's this big octopus interchange with kind of 8 links, and that's because it was a motorway-to-motorway connection that was meant to be there, and that's why it's so wide.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
We haven't spoken about that enough. I just wanted to get that in there, but anyway, okay.
From there, we would have gone around the east of Hamilton, heading towards East Kilbride. There was an allowance for a connection of a motorway to the Stonehouse Newtown that was eventually cancelled. That's in there. We would then have gone around the south of East Kilbride, roughly where Green Hills Road is now in East Kilbride, if you know that area.
Wait, did you say the south of East Kilbride?
Yes, south of East
Because the C-ring is on a different line here.
Oh yeah, the C-ring was much further north. That would have been north.
So this GGTS proposal with this motorway is pulling it further south even more. I'm just trying to think myself in the thinking of the time. It's like, that's even further away.
Because of course the new East Kilbride was going to get bigger, and the Stonehouse Newtown was going to be in there as well. That wouldn't have been too far from East Kilbride, so they were thinking about links between those two as well. So that's probably the reason for that. Okay. And by that point, they probably had realised that North East Kilbride was going to be developed with housing and things, and it was probably easier to take that road away from there.
Yeah.
From East Kilbride, we continue south, all the way across, around the south of Busby, again heading for Hurlet on the A726. But rather than heading north from there, as the County of Renfrew had originally up through Hawkhead and up to the M8, they actually had it going around the south of Paisley, eventually interchanging with the A737 Linwood bypass.
Yeah, it kind of dodges the Glenifer Braes
Yep.
and turns the corner, and it goes up to the Johnson bypass.
Yep.
In basically where the Lynn, roughly, I'd say between where the Lynn Clive interchange is,
Yeah.
and St James, and it's this massive interchange there that they had planned. It's something
huge. And then it would then have continued straight across to the M8, just towards Erskine Bridge.
Yep. In fairness, it would have tied in just, where the railway line's very close to the M8 there.
Yeah.
It would have tied in on those sections. So between 29 and 29A.
Yeah. So the Erskine Bridge would have become, in essence, part of the western flank of Glasgow's outer ring road,
Yes.
making it a far more important link than it's ever been.
And if we just run back like 10 minutes, and you were talking about the... I've seen the little dig in there, it's fine. And see... that you mentioned about the Campsie Expressway is basically starting at Dalnotta, which is at the north of the Erskine Bridge.
Yep.
That's you can do a full lap of the whole conurbation and the whole metropolitan area, because it would tie and go over the Erskine Bridge, and then you're on the Campsie Expressway.
And all free flow links, more or less.
More or less.
So that was certainly exciting. So the proposals were there. There were proposals for outer ring roads. So a lot of people don't think there were any. Hopefully that answers that question. They were there. Now we have to move to why they weren't built.
Yeah.
And if they had been, how would they be performing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think, I'm asking you this as a genuine question, thinking of the Campsie Expressway,
Yes.
are there really many people who go from Dumbarton to Motherwell that would use that?
There'll be some. I don't know. Maybe. But I think if somebody right now is going from Dumbarton to Motherwell, it's a bit of a nightmare. Or I'm more thinking at the moment that we have people... Bearsden, Milgai, and if they want to go anywhere, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Some of these other areas around there. So, I thought about this, and I think that also there's a lot of traffic that could think, well, I could dodge all of this faffing around, being stuck at Provan for hours, or trying to fight your way through the M74 city centre, when all I want to do is go down to, Bishopton or Greenock, or I want to go to Kilbarkin or something like that. They could go right round the top and dodge it all.
So you make a very good point. And thankfully, because we've got copies of these reports, we can see all the traffic survey data. Now, what's clear is that all of these routes, so the intermediate route would have been less busy than the inner ring, and the outer ring would have been less busy than the intermediate ring.
So the further out, the quieter you get.
Yeah. And we'll see that, and the traffic flows on them were going to be much, much lower. And it was only towards the end of the time of the study, so in the year 1990-2000, that they were looking at that point, that the roads were going to become busy enough to justify the construction of these outer rings. And if you look at the survey data of what they expected to be using them, it was minuscule compared to, say, the M8 or the inner ring road or any of these other sections. So from a priority for construction,
they were lower down, of course.
Much lower down. But that's not to say that they weren't important to the counties.
Yeah.
So for
they've seen that as this is going to be our inter-regional road, and it's going to link us up and stuff like that. Yeah.
But it all came at the wrong time. Because, as we know, first of all, local government reorganisation happened in 1975, so the counties were swept away and replaced with Strathclyde region. The funding mechanism for local authorities changed at the same time. Up to that point, there had been grant assistance up to 75% had been made available to the councils to build new roads and new infrastructure. That was taken away overnight. So that severely limited the capacity of the local authorities to build anything more than just basic improvements. And with that funding removed, there was simply no way they could promote it. The Scottish Office made it quite clear that they were not willing to fund roads that were of only local or regional importance. They wanted to invest in the major motorway network. Not just in Glasgow, but across central Scotland. Okay?
Of course.
And for them, that was the upgrade of the major trunk roads. A8, A77, A74, all these roads. So all the money that was available went towards that. And when that was finished, and as we know, actually, it took it way longer to finish than it was ever intended. 2011, if you look at the ME to the M8 and the M64.
Yeah. There have been huge changes.
Yeah.
By that point,
Exactly.
The regional council wasn't even there anymore. That wrapped up in '96.
So, in my view, in my experience from reading everything I've read and the research I've done, there is basically zero chance that any of those roads
we're going to get built.
We're going to get built as proposed in 1968.
Yeah, and we've got there's another thing, Stuart. I've noticed when looking at these maps, and I know we've spoken about the flaws of the GGTS when it came to its forecast and projections of population.
Yeah,
it's one of its things. But actually, I wasn't alive back then, but I can tell you one thing. It would have been a very different place.
Yes.
Industry and all these things are important in the city centre, needed to be served. We're de-industrialised now.
Yeah.
There's more suburban living now. There's higher car ownership. There's higher car dependency in certain areas that require, you've got far more car ownership maybe in some of these places of higher affluence or whatever, that now really don't have roads suitable for them.
Yeah.
So it's and you mentioned as well out of town shopping centres. We got traffic generators much further out of town now. So actually it's almost flipped.
Yeah.
So now it's like we need to do another highway plan right now, but rather than focusing on the centre, we need to focus outside.
Yeah. Now the other thing that's key about this whole proposal, and way back we had the podcast where Chris Hunt came in and we modelled the GGTS.
That was terrific. The thing of decades of arguing, we were proven right.
So it's So although these outer rings were going to be had lower traffic flows on them, they were high enough that it actually left the rest of the network congestion free.
Yeah, because it was your HGVs onto them and everything.
So it was about providing options, I suppose. Ultimately, that if one route was clogged up or if there was an accident, you had options. And that's something this conurbation doesn't actually have a lot of.
We do. We have it with the M8 and the 74.
But they're very close to the centre.
Yeah.
You don't have much option to bypass further out.
Yeah.
Like if you're in... Is Manchester a good example?
Well, Manchester's a complete ring,
of
course. But
so if you're south of Manchester, you're coming up the M56 and there's an accident on the east flank of the M60 and you want to head to Leeds, then you can take the west flank and the north flank of the M60 and head up the M62 that way and avoid it.
Yeah.
So that you've got that. But traffic on the M60
is insane.
There's that. It's not really benefiting Manchester city centre.
No, it's a lot of people going from, the Leeds Bradford area or the A1 and things cutting across to get to North Wales.
There's a lot more inter-urban movement in England than there is in Scotland.
Well, because they've got more cities than us.
Yeah. They're moving a lot more people and goods across a much bigger area. Like if you think of Glasgow, okay, there's a proportion of traffic that goes Glasgow to Edinburgh, Glasgow to Stirling, right?
Yeah.
But within the conurbation...
Most of it's just hopping about, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Paisley to Coatbridge. Mulgai to Nits Hill.
This is what the urban motorway is specialised at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For those kind of things. But, no, I think sometimes as well, there's certain parts of town that I think they're very well catered for with that.
Yeah.
So where we have, where the Renfrew motorway is. The Renfrew motorway is always trying to be a strategic one, but we also have the M74 corridor, the Monkland corridor, Clydeside Expressway, the M77. But north of the town, Stuart, it is so badly lacking. There's nothing. Now
let's start doing some what ifs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So let's say we removed the inner ring road.
Okay.
But we built the intermediate ring road. That, in my view, and in John Cullen's view, would still have provided a degree of benefit to the city centre.
Would you have had link and spurs roads going in? Almost like to dump the traffic somewhere? Well, that's maybe the wrong word, but so that people could get access still to the park and ride or public transport facilities, or would this be a larger concrete collar?
I think it would need to have been, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You could have had... So if you think of that intermediate ring...
Which is what you spoke about earlier when we went all the way from Drumchapel all the way round. Yeah.
That was not going to help. That would have created a bit of an Edinburgh situation. Yeah. And so people who wanted to get to the city centre for shopping or whatever and wanted to do that by car, the intermediate ring would have helped a bit. But you would have been getting dumped on surface streets like Gallowgate, Edinburgh Road, Paisley Road West, and you would then need to have made the last leg of your journey on a narrow city centre street. So that wouldn't have achieved the objective of the corporation, which was to empty the city centre of traffic. So there would probably still have been a degree of traffic cutting through. You also would still have had your local movement, say going from Great Western Road to Denniston.
Yeah, exactly.
Townhead, and a high proportion and people don't realise this, a high proportion of traffic on the inner ring road even now is local journeys.
Yeah.
And it's a high enough percentage that it seriously contributes to the congestion on the inner ring road.
It does. We said it's been that downright lethal mix of local, regional and strategic traffic.
Because it's a bypass and a distributor.
Yeah.
It's not just one or the other. Okay, so the intermediate ring, had it been built, we could have taken the inner ring road out. I don't think it would have made a huge difference to the city centre. Wouldn't have been as convenient to get about, and we would probably have been a bit more Edinburgh-like in the way that we are today.
Yeah.
And maybe we would have had maybe it would have encouraged more park and ride around that intermediate ring.
More park and ride, absolutely.
Yep.
The only thing is sometimes back then I think maybe it would have stifled the city to a degree to not have that inner ring.
Yep.
But nowadays, when we're all thinking about the realm, like urban realm and all these types of things like that, I suppose it would have made an easier environment for them to modify now.
But, and this I think is a valid point, the city centre's gain would have been the south side's loss. So you think about where the South Link motorway goes, Strathbungo, and it led to the creation of to the conservation area there.
That's right.
Queen's Park, round about Hampden, Prospect Hill Road, all these routes round about there in the south of the city. In the East End, slightly easier to build in the East End because at that point a lot of the housing that we now know in the East End wasn't quite there, and they had the empty railway line that they were going to use.
They underwent huge redevelopment in the East End in the last 10, 15 years. Yeah.
But also thinking of the outcry about the proposals to grade separate Annie's Land Cross, never went ahead. The completion of the Crow Road Expressway, between Jordan Hill and Annie's Land Crossing, the section there that's still single 4 rather than dual. There was a lot of outcry there. So we don't actually get the full ring. Moss Park, the boulevard, round about the south of the park there.
Yeah, very wide. You can see whether we could fit that through there.
But nobody wanted the road coming through there either. Nobody wanted the road going through Cardonald. So there's a large proportion of that intermediate ring road that was never popular.
No.
Now, okay, you could say that the M8 isn't popular. M8's not popular now, but in the 60s, in the 70s, the only section of M8 that generated any adverse publicity was the Charing Cross section.
Yeah.
All the rest of it was built through basically either empty or undeveloped land. Now, okay, there's a whole other debate about people being moved out of areas for comprehensive development.
Which we cover extensively.
Yeah. But if you look at where the comprehensive development areas were, there weren't so many of them for the intermediate ring. So it wasn't going to be so easy to clear.
That was good old-fashioned compulsory purchase.
You weren't going to have the blank canvas to put new roads in. So you were going to have to demolish those nice houses down in Tipwood Road and places like that.
I mean, that's right. I mean, one of the things I looked at is there was some things they were trying to do on that South Link. And see at Queen's Park. Yeah. It went through Queen's Park, but it went under it.
Oh, yeah, it was in tunnel.
It was in tunnel in some sections. But look, let's put it this way. It would have been pretty what's a good word to use? Changeable. On the environment, especially the people living there, and dare say could have caused a lot of severance. As we spoke when we were poring over the map, Stuart, before we started this, we thought about how could we actually build this? You'd have to bury the whole thing.
Yeah,
to be honest with you, it would,
and it would have ended up costing 3-4 times as much as the M8 did.
Yeah.
So so really that sort of thing. Now there's a whole proportion of people out there, let's be honest, who hate roads of any kind, who are never going to be happy with road construction. So you're never going to convince someone that one option was better than the other when it comes to motorways in an urban area, because to some people they're just the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think the rational minded of them, if they're anti-road, they're like, we understand the needs for these things, but we don't want them anywhere near towns. Yeah. You do get the kind of banana type people which are like build nothing anywhere near anything. Do you know what I mean?
John's words.
Do you know so you cannot build anything anywhere? It is an acronym that I'm totally butchering, but they don't want us to be they're like anti-movement, so to speak. But they are a minority. That's an extreme kind of thing. But I think a lot of people, when they look at these things, is we understand the need for roads. We do, and these kind of high quality routes, but keep them out of town.
Yeah. So the intermediate ring, then, really what you can see is that half of it could probably have been built fairly easily.
The north flank is a very different animal.
Because it was entirely agricultural.
It was, and the Lomond motorway, which goes through some of these areas, you can even still see where that could go.
Yeah. So the Lomond and the North Link were going to be easy to do, and a proportion of the East Link was going to be easy to do. But that then crucially misses out the southwest corner of the city. So for that traffic coming in from Paisley, Renfrew, Greenock, Port Glasgow, looking to head east, north, south, where would it go?
Yeah.
So the intermediate ring, and thinking of the difficulties there, perhaps wouldn't have worked just so well.
Yeah.
Although you could have had the M8 come in as far as Cardonald and then skirted round. Technically feasible, which is why all these traffic engineers came up with it in the first place. And if it had existed and the inner ring section didn't, it probably would work okay at the expense of the city centre, but it'd probably be all right.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I just, looking at the maps and what if scenarios and stuff like that, I don't know, Stuart. I think what we have now with it is maybe I'm just so used to the inner ring road that we have now. I just couldn't imagine them building that South Link.
Yeah,
to be honest with you. So that moves us on to the outer ones and what ifs and stuff like that. What if they never built the M8 in Glasgow at all, and it really it stopped, say, at Bayliston?
Yeah,
and you had it round there.
So again, the important thing to remember here as well is even cities with the full motorway standard outer ring roads like London, Manchester, they still have motorways and dual carriageways within the centre to move traffic about. So thinking of London, you've got the M4 and the A40 and the A2.
Yeah, so the A40. Okay, all right. I'm sorry to be technical about this. You have a few. You have the M1. You also have the M11.
Yeah.
You had the A40 Westway, which was actually A40M, but all these got downgraded.
Yep.
And the East Cross route and the Blackwall Tunnel South approaches and all this kind of thing. You're right. You can't get away from having big high quality routes in town.
So London's got the M25, but it's complemented by other routes to improve access to the centre. Manchester's the same. It's got the M602 and the A58M.
It's A57M.
57M.
And these kind of things. So that's, you're talking like the Mancunian way.
Yeah,
because you've got these two routes in there. So
and it's got a ring road, a dual carriageway ring road as well.
It has. It's got kind of like an inner ring.
So you still need some kind of improvement to the road system. So I always remember John Cullen saying actually that if the M8, if the motorway hadn't happened, that they would likely still have pushed for something akin to the Coventry ring road.
Yeah,
something like that. There would still have been a bypass of this, an all-purpose dual carriageway bypass of the city centre.
Yeah,
that's what they would have pushed for. But okay, so coming back to the discussion, if we built nothing except the outer rings as proposed in the GGTS, how would the conurbation be working? Okay,
well, what I think at the time, I don't think it would have helped the city centre at all. I don't think a heck of a lot of journeys would have gone in, and this outer ring probably wouldn't have been used so much.
Yeah.
But what it would have done is it would have encouraged sprawl, tremendous sprawl.
Oh, yeah.
Because you would find that route would be completely built up around it, distribution centres, industry, housing developments, things like that. There would be more junctions bolted on because it'd be convenient. So what you would have done is you would have actually sucked the vibrancy and the population and the money out from the centre, because everyone's like, that's a nightmare, we can't get into that. But hold on, there's this brand new so ring road.
Your Silverburn might have actually been much further south, round about like Neilston or something like that, much further south, nearer the ring.
This was, the Aberdeen Western Peripheral route.
Yeah.
Because you're not allowed to call it bypass. This was some of the criticism people had about that. It's very far out, and all it's going to do is it's going to draw things out of Aberdeen and stuff and put them on this lovely new high quality route.
And of course, the thing about the Aberdeen bypass is a good example, just like the Edinburgh. It's designed for strategic traffic that's going from the south to the north and the north to the south. It's got no business in the city centre.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of what was the thinking behind some of these motorways as well. But when you start to think about our conurbation, right, and you compare it with some of the others. So I'm thinking about the M60. It's quite common for someone to go from Liverpool to Leeds.
Yeah.
And the M60 works phenomenally well for that. Because you can come up from the west, you can nip around the loop and then head out northeast towards Leeds, right? And likewise, if you want to go from Lancaster down to, say, what's south, what's Stockport,
Yeah.
right? It works very well for that. The Glasgow conurbation is kind of different. It's almost isolated.
Yeah.
There's nothing major to the north, the south, or the west.
That's right.
Right?
That's why I always said you can be on the wrong side of the city, strategically on the right side. Because if you, like, I used to live in the west of Glasgow, whatever you're doing, you're fighting through all that traffic to get to the rest of the world.
Right. Okay, so we've got Stirling, and we've got Perth, and we've got Edinburgh, right? But the primary movements in our conurbation are within it rather than through it. And that's kind of the problem, that our other major built-up areas are quite far away from, and they're not big, they're not huge, they're not. It's not a Leeds and a Sheffield and a Liverpool and a Chester and a Warrington and all these huge towns and cities all around about a major area. We have one city in the middle and a road that is basically going through the part of it that's busiest, that people need to get to the most. So that's kind of the point. So these outer rings. So really the point, I guess, I'm trying to make is that I don't think the outer rings on their own for Glasgow wouldn't have worked. It really wouldn't have helped the situation. Because if you were in Paisley and you wanted to go to Edinburgh, you're not going to have to want to go all the way around the south of East Kilbride.
It's circuitous, isn't it?
It would have been far more mileage, which would have meant far more fuel burned, which would have, which wouldn't have been very sustainable anyway.
Well, you would have gone, I'll just go through the middle,
You would just have gone through the middle. You would have went back to the old A8 and you would have continued to use it.
But this is at the time, this argument.
Yeah.
But say this all magically, we open our curtains and blinds tomorrow and boom, we've got a full 360-degree circumference kind of ring road around the city. You jump on it and of course you'd use it because obviously the roads are so busy now in certain areas, and if you want to use those things, you probably would now.
But would it be effective? I mean, right, so if I want to go from, say, Motherwell to Glasgow city centre, that outer ring road is of no benefit whatsoever.
No, you'd still take the 74.
I would need to use the A74.
Yeah. No, I'm talking as if you have it now, you have the full complement.
Oh, the whole lot. So, if you've got everything, that's great because you've got multiple choices. But what we're talking about is if we only had the outer ring roads and nothing else. So the M74 would have ended at Motherwell, coming from the south onto the outer ring. And then you would then have had nothing until you got to the M8 right out at Bishopton almost.
I mean, I suppose it'd be handy if you're going from one, if you're going to completely the opposite end, I suppose, or something like that.
So if I was going from Motherwell to Paisley, brilliant, great.
Yeah.
But if I'm trying to go from Motherwell to Glasgow city centre or Motherwell to...
That's tricky.
Yeah, that becomes much more difficult. And again, it comes back to the point. Glasgow was the centre of the universe as far as they were concerned.
Specifically the city centre, all the industry there, that's where people want to go shopping, so that's where we built the roads and catered for it. Now, you remember ages ago, I went to Texas, I went to Houston. Yeah. Do you know the way they built their system is exactly the same? The inner ring road and inner box was done first, then they done, the loop. Yep. And then they done the Beltway, and now they're building the outer ones because that's got all the... So actually, they're doing it in almost the same... So they built the inner ones first to go out. So it's not that strange, really.
No. There's practice, particularly in America, for that style, of course, and a lot of the Glasgow system had its origins in that sort of system as well. So, it's an interesting one. As I say, there's always going to be people who are going to say, I think the M8 is ridiculous, it shouldn't have happened. From a traffic functionality point of view, it's in the best place for it. It's in the place it needed to be the most effective. Yeah. To replace the old...
Pragmatic that way. Yeah. I know.
And if you take it away, well, someone else needs to suffer because, all right, we want to discourage people from driving, we want people to get out of their cars and use public transport more, but there's still the movement of goods. Yeah,
and businesses, there's so many LGVs and things like that on the roads as well. So, absolutely.
Way more white vans on the road than there ever were before. Well, the deliveries and things that are happening nowadays, and that has generated a huge amount of traffic. So people talk about the convenience, all right, so Glasgow city centre, the retail's dying off in there as it is across the country. People are sitting in the houses that conveniently getting delivered to the door. But rather than them taking their car into Glasgow to pick it up, there's now a van in the road that's bringing it to their door instead. So there's still traffic generated as a result of that change.
I'll tell you this. This is can I give you a little anecdote about McDonald's in East Kilbride? I've noticed this change in the last year or something like that. Is McDonald's places have always been very busy for traffic. They often sometimes back up onto the street and stuff. Yeah, where they're very, very quiet, and there were hardly any customers in there. Yeah, just Deliveroo and Just Eat drivers everywhere. Yep. And then they were all getting into their little cars and going off and doing things. I don't know how many orders these guys take, but what we have done is, sure enough, people are not driving to these places. We're getting so many more deliveries. Same way with Amazon.
Yeah.
But still, somebody has to be on the road putting these things out. You know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a little bit more efficient because you've got one guy and all the parcels and stuff.
But then I read a piece of
You know?
research somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, that actually said that most of this stuff that's been generated with Deliveroo and Just Eat are people who wouldn't have had a car to drive to McDonald's in the first place.
They would have walked.
They would either have walked or they just wouldn't have gone. So it's made it more convenient for people who don't necessarily have access to a car,
Yeah.
right? So there's
Interesting.
Yeah, so the research that I was reading was that the very small proportion of people who would have traditionally used the drive-through have stopped. You know, on the whole, those folk are still turning up. But these folk who live in flats and things who maybe don't have access to parking and they don't have a car.
And the McDonald's is miles away.
they're
and,
like, oh, I'll just order it now.
and sure enough, it,
Yeah.
it turns up.
Yeah.
It's maybe it's a good thing so everyone can enjoy junk food, but then again, from a public health kind of thing, it's a whole different matter. But yeah, I see what you mean. Very, very interesting. That to be honest, it's created more journeys.
Right, okay, let's sum up.
Let's sum up.
Would the conurbation be any better if we had only had the outer ring roads?
I think we can definitively say no.
So my view would be that if we had the outer ring roads on their own would be completely insufficient, given the nature of the conurbation that we live in. The intermediate rings would have been effective to an extent, probably creating a situation kind of similar to what we have in Edinburgh, but the city centre would have suffered as a result of that. But on the other hand, the buildability of much of the intermediate ring actually wasn't great.
It wasn't feasible.
No.
I think it was one of these ones that maybe just to give them their corner is all the anti-M8 lobby, particularly of the urban sections. I suppose they would have not had this problem, would they? It would never have been there in the first place if we had the intermediate rings, you know?
But there probably would have been something else.
Possibly, some wide dual carriageway snaking through it all. Yeah.
It's all interesting, and while traffic is at the levels that it's at and has grown over the last 50 years, it's quite difficult to imagine anything other than that. And I know there's reduction targets and things there now, but
Do you know, there's something about Glasgow, with the exception of the north, I look at it and the whole metropolitan area, and overall, I've got good journey options.
Yeah.
You don't say that for many cities.
That's true. It's very true.
It's a network, that seems to work.
It's a
quite
proper planned network that caters for the local, the regional, and the national movements.
So I can only say that they've probably done it the right way. But I'll go back to some other points. We are getting at a point now where it's very high traffic levels, and if there is even talk about ever removing the motorways or restricting their capacity in some way, you need to offset that by having some kind of outer roads.
Or a significant reduction in traffic. Good, viable alternatives that people can use to get
But they
into
never
these
do
areas.
this. They always, there's the public transport and so on, but it's just expensive and awful.
Yeah.
So, you need to cater for these movements elsewhere. And if that's been the Northern Bypass that I lobby for so much, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, one of the followers on Twitter, Alistair McKay, had asked about Rotterdam as a good example of a city that had its outer ring road built, and compared, and he was interested in what we would think about that versus Glasgow. Now, I had a look at Rotterdam and I put Glasgow in it side by side. So it seems to me that from the west side of its ring to the east side, it's approximately 7 miles. Now, that's more or less the same as the distance between the Kingston Bridge and the M73. From the north to the south flanks in Rotterdam, it's about 5 miles.
Okay.
5-6 miles. In Glasgow, the maximum distance between the M8 and the M74 is about 3 miles. Okay, so we're a bit closer in that regard. Okay, so Rotterdam it's a really good place. So you can actually see the outer ring sitting. But when I actually zoomed in and had a look in detail, I saw that they had a good network of city centre routes as well. Many of them in underpasses. Like cut and cover tunnels.
I'm looking at the maps just now.
And a lot of them are free flow links as well. So, Alistair, it's kind of difficult to compare because it looks to me as if they do actually have a good network of inner city roads as well that caters for movements. It's just that their motorway class routes are a bit further out, but really not much further out than ours with regards, the M73, M8. It's just that the positioning of ours kind of puts it more to the middle and east of the city rather than entirely around it. If you could lift the whole network up and move it away from the city centre, move it westwards and stick it down again, you know, it would more or less fall into where the intermediate rings are in the
Yeah,
highway
more-
plan and the
more or less.
GGTS. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Rotterdam was a good one to look at. But again, I was interested to see though that they do still have wide urban roads in the city centre. I was
Yeah.
expecting like the typical sort of Dutch town, like thinking of like Bruges in Belgium, where there's just like no traffic in the city centre, and you've got a really good ring road on the outside. I think Maastricht is the same. You know, a lot of these Dutch towns, very well served by motorways connecting the main cities and towns, but very little in the centre itself. I know Amsterdam's like that. But yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. Certainly will have impressed all our Dutch listeners by that.
Yeah. And I think we have at least one.
We have at least one. Yeah.
Okay. Any other points you would like to make?
Not really. I mean, it was this other one where I just said, look, we have a quite a good network here that seems to work quite well in certain areas. There is definitely opportunities for improvement in the north of the town. That's all I'm going to say.
To the north.
It would be quite nice, as you say, to go from Motherwell to Paisley quite easily. It is a pain having to go all the way. It's like I always felt living west of the city a bit cut off, because I've got one option. The Renfrew motorway. I've got to go through there, and that is a monster.
It's a good example. I mean, a few weeks ago we posted copies of the Edinburgh City Bypass booklets somewhere, and there was a couple of people started complaining about the Edinburgh City Bypass and the traffic it generates. But the Edinburgh City Bypass was built for through traffic. It was built to bypass the city. It was for people going from the east to the west.
One of the arguments I've had of several engineers who've it's actually a distributor road as well, and it is because it's got a lot of junctions on it.
Yeah,
it has the M25 problem in that it's an encouraging route. But you're right, it is. It connects you with the A1. It connects you to the M8. You know what I mean? It's to get people across from there.
Remember what John Cullen always told us: we didn't build motorways at a cost of millions of pounds so that no one would use them.
You'd build them.
What would be the point?
Yeah,
a busy motorway is a working motorway.
It is.
Is what he would say, but he was very much of his time.
Yes.
But it's
generational.
It's true. You don't spend 400 million building, the equivalent of 400 million building a motorway system, and then hope no one uses it. It's going to generate traffic. That's the point of it.
Yeah.
But other areas benefit from that.
Yeah, because the traffic is drawn onto them,
That's kind of the point.
And that's all we can say.
That's often lost these days, that thinking.
I know, it'd be good. You need to take people and show them this alternative universe with these things,
it's very difficult to have measured, reasonable debate on social media with people these days.
Quite.
People are very clear and polarised in their views. You either are against something or for it. You can't have an open-minded view.
Well, that's what they say about fanatics and extremists. They're always so sure about things, and those that are knowledgeable are always doubting. It's not a good thing.
Yes,
but
indeed.
Social media tends to do that.
Well, listen, these are just our ramblings on it.
Of course.
I hope you found it useful based on our own experience and research and things about the intermediate and outer rings and the like. No doubt some people disagree completely with what we've said. Be interested to hear from them.
Yeah.
It would be good to do a follow-up at some point. To gauge people's thoughts and have a wee discussion on that.
Absolutely.
We have a lot more interesting podcasts coming up this year. If you've got any topics that you would specifically like us to cover,
yes, I haven't requested that in a while. I used to say this, and there's so many things still to talk about, but so the floor's over to you guys, and it's like Stuart and I know about these things, talk about these things, but if there's something you feel we're not covering, ask us. Let's go. Anything you want us to talk about to do with this kind of thing, we'd love to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
So suggest some stuff.
Yeah, and it's actually, I think this is the 5th year of our podcast series.
No,
so we started in 2018, so this is year 5. So 4 years ago just now we started. So this is like the 5th series of podcasts.
I suppose the way it's fallen, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course there's way more than.
What have I done with my life?
Yeah. Good opportunity there actually to thank the sponsors.
Yeah.
Andy and the team at Eastford Excavations and Nigel and the team at HBS, who help keep this going.
Who make this possible, so thank you very much, guys.
So thanks to them. And of course all 50 odd episodes are available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you get anywhere else you'll find your podcast series.
You okay there, Stuart?
Just too much talking now, I think.
It is. It's getting to that time. And don't forget about social media as well. We've got some fantastic posts now on Mondays, the Then and Now series.
Yes. We've got some new features. We're trying some new things. We've got Then and Nows on Monday.
Yep.
We've got aerial photos on Wednesday. We've got car spotting on Thursday.
Yes.
So that's our new week, and we've got other posts.
Caters for all the different people. Yeah, so it's a new regimen. But yeah, Facebook, Instagram as well, the one I always forget about, and Twitter. So yeah, all of these things are kind of replicated across there. So, go on, get your daily fix.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, leave a review on the podcasts. It's always good to hear from you, see what you think. We're still on 5 stars. So that's good. Must be doing something right.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. Okay. And anyway, we'll see you very soon. But thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.